The small research outpost on planet LV-227 stood alone against the purple horizon, its metal walls reflecting the light of the twin moons overhead. Inside, Tom Walker sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on the strange readings flashing across his screen. As the station's only xenobiologist, he had spent the last 3 years studying the local wildlife, but these energy patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen before. "That's impossible," he muttered, adjusting his scanner settings for the 3rd time. The readings showed a creature with an energy signature nearly 3 times larger than any known species in the galaxy. He rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his cold coffee. The station's AI suddenly crackled to life. "Warning. Incoming emergency transmission from Galactic Council." Tom straightened in his chair as the holographic screen flickered to life. The stern face of Admiral Ross appeared, his expression grim. "All research stations in Sector 7. This is a Priority 1 evacuation order. We have confirmed sightings of Shadowhunters in your vicinity. I repeat, Shadowhunters have entered your sector." Tom's heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew about Shadowhunters, the apex predators of the galaxy. Stories told of entire colonies wiped out, of ships torn apart like paper. Yet, in all his years of research, he had never seen actual proof of their existence. "All personnel must evacuate within 6 standard hours," Admiral Ross continued. "This is not a drill. Shadowhunters are classified as Threat Level Omega. Any contact is considered fatal." The transmission ended, leaving Tom alone with his thoughts and the quiet hum of the station's systems. He looked at his screen again, at the strange energy readings that had caught his attention. Something didn't add up. The pattern was too regular, too structured for a mindless predator. He should have started packing. He should have called for an evacuation ship. Instead, Tom did what any good scientist would do. He gathered his equipment. Log personal note," he said, checking his portable scanner. "Energy signatures suggest possible Shadowhunter presence. Basic scientific protocol demands investigation before evacuation." He knew he was stretching the truth, but his curiosity wouldn't let him leave, not when he was possibly on the verge of the biggest discovery in galactic history. The purple sky had darkened to deep indigo as Tom followed the energy readings into a nearby valley. The scanner led him to a cave entrance partially hidden behind thick alien vegetation. The readings were stronger here, pulsing like a heartbeat. That's when he heard it. A low, rumbling sound that made the ground vibrate beneath his feet. Tom's training told him to run, but his scientific mind kept him rooted to the spot. The sound wasn't aggressive. It seemed almost pained. Activating his light rod, Tom cautiously entered the cave. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing crystalline formations on the walls that sparkled like stars. The rumbling grew louder, and then he saw it. The creature was massive, easily 4 times his size. Its body was covered in what looked like natural armor plates, each one etched with intricate bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with a soft blue light. One of its limbs was trapped under fallen rocks, and dark fluid, probably blood, pooled beneath it. This was a Shadowhunter. The galaxy's most feared predator was right in front of him, injured and vulnerable. Tom's hand shook as he pointed his light rod at the creature. The Shadowhunter's eyes, all 6 of them, opened, revealing swirling patterns of gold and black. What happened next would change galactic history forever. Instead of attacking, the creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted, creating complex sequences of light that danced across its armor. The rumbling changed pitch, becoming almost melodic. Tom stood transfixed. This wasn't the behavior of a mindless killer. These were deliberate patterns, a form of communication. The creature could have easily killed him with its other limbs, but it didn't. Instead, it washed him with what Tom could only describe as intelligence and curiosity. In that moment, Tom Walker made a decision that would either get him killed or revolutionize everything the galaxy thought it knew about Shadowhunters. He turned off his light rod, took out his medical scanner, and stepped closer to the injured creature. "Don't worry," he said softly, knowing the creature probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping it would understand his tone. "I'm going to help you." The Shadowhunter's patterns shifted again, and Tom could have sworn they grew just a little bit brighter. Tom's hands moved quickly as he unpacked his medical supplies. The cave's darkness was now lit by the gentle blue glow of the Shadowhunter's bioluminescent patterns, casting dancing shadows on the crystalline walls. His heart raced as he worked, knowing that every rule and protocol in the book said he should be running away, not helping this creature. The station's AI buzzed through his communicator. "Warning. Evacuation deadline approaching. 4 hours remaining." "Noted," Tom replied, not taking his eyes off his work. He had managed to scan the creature's trapped limb, finding that while the injury wasn't life-threatening, it needed immediate attention. The rocks pinning it down were heavy, but not impossible to move with the right tools. The Shadowhunter watched his every move, its 6 eyes tracking him with an intensity that made the back of his neck tingle. Its bioluminescent patterns had settled into a steady, pulsing rhythm that reminded Tom of a heartbeat. Every few minutes, it would emit that low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the entire cave. "I need to go back to my station for some equipment," Tom said, making slow, deliberate gestures. "I'll return." "Understand. Return." To his amazement, the creature's patterns shifted, forming new sequences of light that moved across its armor like flowing water. It lowered its massive head slightly, in what Tom could have sworn was a nod. The trip back to the station was quick. Tom grabbed a gravity lifter, more medical supplies, and his cynobiology research tools. As he packed, the emergency channel crackled to life again. "Research Station LV-227. This is Galactic Council Control. Our sensors show you haven't initiated evacuation procedures. Explain immediately." Tom took a deep breath before responding. "This is Tom Walker. I'm conducting critical research that could change everything we know about Shadowhunters. Requesting permission to extend evacuation deadline." There was a long pause before the reply came. "Negative, Walker. Shadowhunters have destroyed 3 colonies in the past month alone. They are not research subjects. They are threats to be eliminated. Begin evacuation immediately." Tom switched off the communicator. He knew he was probably ending his career, but something deep inside told him this was more important than any job. Back in the cave, he found the Shadowhunter exactly where he'd left it. Its patterns brightened when he entered, and Tom felt a strange warmth in his chest. Using the gravity lifter, he carefully began moving the rocks one by one. As he worked, Tom noticed something fascinating. The creature's light patterns changed whenever he moved a particularly heavy rock, almost as if it was trying to guide him. He started paying attention to these signals, and the work went faster. Finally, the last rock came free. The Shadowhunter slowly moved its injured limb, testing it carefully. The wound wasn't pretty, but Tom's scanner showed no permanent damage. "Let me clean that up for you," he said, reaching for his medical kit. The creature remained perfectly still as he applied healing gel to the wound. Its patterns had changed again, now showing slow, circular movements that seemed almost peaceful. Suddenly, both their heads snapped up at a new sound, a distant roar that made the cave crystals vibrate. The Shadowhunter's patterns flashed rapidly, and it made a series of quick, chirping sounds. Tom's scanner went wild as multiple massive energy signatures appeared nearby. More Shadowhunters were coming. His heart pounded as he packed his supplies with shaking hands. This was it. He was about to die in this cave, torn apart by a pack of the galaxy's deadliest predators. But then something extraordinary happened. The injured Shadowhunter moved, placing itself between Tom and the cave entrance. Its patterns blazed bright blue, and it began emitting a complex series of sounds and light signals. When the other Shadowhunters arrived, they were enormous, even larger than Tom's new friend. Their patterns glowed in various colors, from deep purple to bright green. They exchanged light signals with the injured one, their patterns shifting and changing in what was clearly a complex conversation. To Tom's utter amazement, none of them made any aggressive moves toward him. Instead, they seemed curious. One of them even moved closer, its patterns matching the peaceful circular movements he had seen earlier. In that moment, Tom Walker knew he had stumbled upon something revolutionary. These weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent beings with their own language and social structure. And somehow, he had just become the first human to make peaceful contact with them. His communicator beeped again. 2 hours until evacuation deadline. Tom looked at the group of shadow hunters, then at his equipment. He had a choice to make: follow protocol and leave, or stay and uncover the truth about these magnificent creatures. The decision, he realized, had already been made the moment he first chose to help. The next few days in the cave system changed everything Tom thought he knew about shadow hunters. He had completely ignored the evacuation order, instead setting up a small research camp near the cave entrance. The injured shadow hunter, which he still called Blue, had become his constant companion. Fascinating, Tom muttered, recording notes as he watched Blue interact with the others. They're not hunting at all. They're patrolling. Through careful observation, he had noticed that the shadow hunters moved in organized patterns across their territory. They weren't looking for prey. They were guarding something. Each group followed specific routes, their bioluminescent patterns changing to share information when they met. Blue had healed quickly, far faster than any known species. Yet it chose to stay near Tom's camp, often sitting for hours watching him work. Sometimes it would make those melodic rumbling sounds, which Tom now recognized as their form of speech. On the 4th day, something remarkable happened. Tom was reviewing his notes when Blue approached with something in one of its 4 front limbs. It was a crystal, similar to those in the cave walls, but this one pulsed with its own inner light. "What's this?" Tom asked, carefully taking the crystal. As soon as he touched it, the crystal's light synchronized with Blue's patterns. A flood of images filled his mind. He saw vast underground chambers filled with similar crystals, shadow hunters standing guard over them, and strange energy patterns flowing between them. The vision ended as quickly as it had started. Tom staggered backward, his mind reeling from what he'd seen. "You're not predators at all," he whispered. "You're guardians." Blue's patterns shifted in what Tom had come to recognize as agreement. The crystal had shown him the truth. The shadow hunters were protecting ancient power sources, ones that could be devastating in the wrong hands. His revelation was interrupted by a harsh sound from his communicator. The Galactic Council had finally noticed his missed evacuation. "Walker," Admiral Ross's voice was furious. "Our sensors show your life signs in the middle of Shadowhunter territory. Have you lost your mind?" Tom looked at Blue, who was watching the communicator with interest. "Admiral, you need to listen. Everything we know about Shadowhunters is wrong. They're intelligent, peaceful unless provoked, and they're protecting something vital. They've destroyed 3 colonies." The Admiral shot back. "Have you checked what those colonies were doing?" Tom asked, thinking about the crystal in his hand. Were they mining? Trying to harvest crystals? The silence that followed was telling. "Those weren't attacks," Tom continued. "They were defending their charges. Admiral, we need to completely rethink our approach to." A new alarm cut him off. His sensors were picking up something big entering the atmosphere. Blue's patterns suddenly flared bright, and the other shadow hunters began emerging from their caves, all showing alert patterns. "That would be the military vessel I sent to rescue you," Admiral Ross said grimly, "and to deal with the shadow hunter threat once and for all." Tom's blood ran cold. He looked at Blue, who was now making rapid signals to the others. The shadow hunters weren't showing aggression. They were organizing the defense of their territory, of the crystals they protected. "Admiral, you have to call them off," Tom pleaded. "If they attack, the shadow hunters will have to defend themselves. It will only prove what everyone wrongly believes about them." "The decision has been made, Walker," Ross replied. Get to safety if you can." The communicator went dead. Tom could see the military ship's lights in the darkening sky, getting closer. Around him, dozens of shadow hunters had gathered, their patterns pulsing in unified sequences. They could easily destroy the ship, but that would just reinforce their violent reputation. Blue turned to Tom, its patterns forming a question. In that moment, Tom realized he might be the only one who could prevent a disaster. He had to make the military understand what he had learned. He had to bridge the gap between two species before fear and misunderstanding led to needless deaths. "I have an idea," he said to Blue, holding up the crystal. "But I'm going to need your help. We have to show them what you showed me." Blue's patterns brightened in response, and for the first time, Tom heard what could only be described as a hopeful tone in its rumbling voice. The military ship descended through the purple clouds, its massive hull blocking out the light of the twin moons. Tom stood at the cave entrance, the crystal clutched in his hands, with Blue towering protectively beside him. The other shadow hunters had formed a wide circle around them, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in unison. The ship's engines roared as it landed in the valley, sending dust swirling through the air. A ramp lowered, and armed soldiers poured out, taking defensive positions. Behind them walked a tall man with commander's stripes, Captain Jack Stone. "Walker," Stone shouted through a voice amplifier. "Step away from those creatures. That's an order." Tom held his ground. "Captain, you need to listen to me first. I can prove these beings aren't what we think they are. We have footage of them destroying colonies." Stone's finger rested on his weapon's trigger. "They're mindless killers." Blue made a low rumbling sound, and Tom noticed its patterns had changed to show slow, calm sequences. The other shadow hunters matched these patterns, creating a stunning display of synchronized lights that reflected off the crystalline cave walls. "Look at them, Captain," Tom called out. "Do they look like they're attacking? They've had every chance to kill me, but instead, they've shown me the truth. Those colonies weren't innocent victims. They were trying to steal something precious." Stone hesitated, his eyes scanning the impressive display of lights around him. "What are you talking about?" Tom held up the crystal. "This is what they're protecting. But it's easier if I show you." He started walking slowly toward Stone, Blue moving carefully beside him. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Stone held up his hand, stopping them. When Tom reached Stone, he held out the crystal. "Touch it. Please, see what I saw." Stone looked at the crystal suspiciously, then at Blue, who had lowered its massive head to their level. After a long moment, he reached out and touched the crystal. The effect was immediate. Stone's eyes went wide as the crystal's light pulsed, connecting with Blue's patterns. Tom knew what the captain was seeing. The same vision he had received. The ancient chambers deep underground, the powerful energy sources the shadow hunters protected, and the truth about the colonial attacks. The vision expanded, showing more. Mining operations drilling into sacred chambers, workers trying to steal crystals. The shadow hunters attempting peaceful warnings first, using their light patterns to communicate danger. Only when the miners kept pushing did the shadow hunters resort to force. When the vision ended, Stone stumbled backward, catching himself on a nearby rock. They were protecting an ancient power source," he said, his voice shaking. "The colonies, they were illegal mining operations. They knew what they were doing was wrong. The shadow hunters are guardians," Tom explained, as Blue's patterns shifted to show calming sequences. "They're intelligent beings with a sacred duty. They only fight when they have no choice." Stone looked up at Blue with new understanding. "All this time, we've been calling them monsters, but we were the ones invading their territory." He turned to his soldiers. "Stand down. Lower your weapons." As the soldiers complied, something extraordinary happened. Blue stepped forward and extended one of its limbs toward Stone, holding another crystal. The captain carefully took it, and this time the vision was different. It showed scenes of cooperation. Humans and shadow hunters working together to protect the crystal chambers. They're offering an alliance, Tom realized, watching Blue's patterns shift to bright, positive sequences. They want us to help them protect these power sources, not fight over them. Stone nodded slowly, then straightened to his full height. I need to contact the Galactic Council immediately. They have to know the truth. He looked at Tom. And you, Walker, you've just changed the course of galactic history. Tom smiled, reaching up to touch Blue's armored hide. The shadow hunter's pattern swirled with what he now recognized as happiness. Around them, the other shadow hunters began approaching the soldiers, their own patterns showing curiosity rather than aggression. The truth had finally emerged. Now the real work could begin, building trust between two species that had misunderstood each other for far too long. 2 weeks after the military confrontation, Tom's small research station had transformed into a busy cultural exchange center. Where once stood a single building, now stretched a series of interconnected structures, with both humans and shadow hunters working together to build understanding between their species. Tom sat at his new desk, surrounded by screens showing various light pattern sequences. Blue stood nearby, watching as Tom worked on their translation system. They had discovered that each pattern sequence was like a word or phrase, and when combined with their rumbling sounds, formed a complex language. Try this one, Tom said, activating a light panel that mimicked Shadowhunter patterns. The sequence he created moved in slow waves. Blue's patterns shifted in what Tom now recognized as their version of laughter. The translation computer beeped. Close, the machine translated Blue's response. But pattern means sleeping fish, not welcome friend. Tom chuckled, making the adjustment in his notes. At least I'm not accidentally insulting anyone anymore. Remember when I tried to say good morning and actually signaled tasty rocks? Their work was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Helen Miller, the lead scientist sent by the Galactic Council to study Shadowhunter culture. She rushed into the room, her eyes bright with excitement. Tom, Blue, you need to see this. She activated a large screen showing deep cave scans. We've finished mapping the crystal chamber network. It's incredible. They stretch across half the continent. Blue's patterns shifted to show interest, and it moved closer to the screen. The translation computer worked to keep up with its rapid signals. Ancient ones built chambers, it translated. We protect. Many cycles of moons. Tom nodded, making more notes. The Shadowhunters had been guarding these power sources for thousands of years, passing the duty down through generations. Each crystal chamber produced enough clean energy to power an entire city, but they had to be protected from misuse. Outside the station, more Shadowhunters had gathered. They had grown comfortable with the human presence, often bringing their young ones to observe. Tom watched through the window as a small Shadowhunter, barely larger than a human, tried to mimic the light patterns of the station's warning beacons. They're natural learners, Dr. Miller observed. Just like us. All those years wasted fighting when we could have been learning from each other. The day's biggest surprise came during the afternoon meeting. Representatives from both species gathered in the newly built conference chamber, its walls lined with crystal-powered translation screens. Blue, now officially recognized as the local Shadowhunter leader, stood at the front with Tom. My people wish to share knowledge. Blue's patterns translated, not just of crystals, of stars, of space paths, of life in deep dark. The human scientists in the room leaned forward eagerly. The Shadowhunters weren't just guardians, they were explorers. Their bioluminescent patterns helped them navigate space, and they had mapped routes that human ships had never discovered. We have protected power, Blue continued. Now maybe protect together. Share wisdom. Grow strong as one. Tom felt pride swelling in his chest as he watched humans and Shadowhunters working together around the room. Some were studying crystal energy patterns, others were learning each other's languages, and a few were even trying to design ships that could accommodate both species. A small alert popped up on Tom's screen. Another Galactic Council ship was approaching, but this time there was no fear. The ship carried more scientists, more builders, and more people eager to learn about their new allies. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tom asked Blue as they watched the ship land. "When I found you injured in that cave, did you think we'd end up here?" Blue's patterns formed the sequence for hope mixed with friendship. "Knew you different," the translator spoke. "Saw heart light, like our light. Not same outside, but same inside." Tom smiled, remembering how terrified he'd been just weeks ago. Now, standing beside his friend, watching their two species build a future together, he understood something profound. Sometimes, the scariest moments in life led to the most beautiful changes. As the new ship's passengers began to disembark, Blue's patterns shifted to the welcome sequence, the real one, not Tom's sleeping fish version. Other shadow hunters joined in, creating a dazzling display of synchronized light that lit up the purple sky. The bridge between their worlds grew stronger every day. The peace between humans and shadow hunters faced its first real test 3 months after the initial contact. Tom was reviewing the morning's crystal energy readings when every alarm in the station started blaring at once. Multiple ships detected entering restricted space. The station's AI announced, "Warning, mining equipment detected." Blue burst into the room, its patterns flashing urgent red and yellow sequences. The translator struggled to keep up with the rapid signals. "Bad ones come. Steelmakers, crystal breakers," it translated. "Many ships, many drills. Moving toward sacred chambers." Tom quickly pulled up the sensor readings. His heart sank as he recognized the ships. They belonged to Galaxy Mining Corporation, one of the largest and most ruthless companies in the sector. The same corporation that had been behind the previous attacks on Shadowhunter territories. "They must have heard about our discoveries," Tom said, already sending emergency signals to the Galactic Council. "They're trying to grab the crystals before official protection laws are passed." Through the station's windows, he could see dozens of Shadowhunters gathering, their patterns shifting into aggressive defense sequences he hadn't seen since the military confrontation. The translator picked up their combined signals. Must protect, must fight, must defend sacred trust. Captain Stone, who had stayed on as military liaison, rushed into the command center. "Walker, we've got 10 heavy mining ships incoming. They're not responding to warnings." Tom looked at Blue, whose patterns now showed a complex mix of anger and concern. If the Shadowhunters attacked the ships, even in defense of their territory, it would undo months of progress. The galaxy would see them as violent creatures again, just as they were starting to change minds. "We need another way," Tom said firmly. He turned to Blue. "Friend, please ask your people to wait. Let me try something first." Blue's patterns shifted to show trust, though the urgent red tones remained. It sent out a signal to the others, and the gathered Shadowhunters held their positions, though their patterns still pulsed with defensive energy. Tom activated the station's most powerful communication channel. "Galaxy Mining Corporation vessels, this is Tom Walker of the Human Shadowhunter Research Station. You are entering protected space. The crystals in this region are under joint human Shadowhunter protection. Reverse course immediately." "This is Captain Reed of GMC," came the reply. "We have valid mining claims to this region that predate your little science project. Move aside, or we'll move you." The mining ships kept coming, their massive drills extending from their hulls. Tom could feel the tension rising as both Shadowhunters and human security forces prepared for conflict. That's when he had an idea. "Blue," he said quickly, "remember how the crystals showed visions to Captain Stone? Can they do more? Can they show everyone what would happen if they're damaged?" Blue's patterns changed to show understanding. It quickly communicated with the other Shadowhunters, and something extraordinary began to happen. All around the valley, crystals started to glow with intense light. The Shadowhunters arranged themselves in a massive circle, their patterns synchronizing with the crystal energy. Tom felt the hair on his arms stand up as power built in the air. Suddenly, every screen, every communications channel, Every viewing device in range lit up with the same vision. The mining ship's crews saw what would happen if they damaged the crystal chambers, the release of uncontrolled energy, the destruction that would spread across the planet, the collapse of delicate systems that the Shadowhunters had maintained for millennia. The lead mining ship stopped first, its drills retracting. Then another and another, until all 10 ships hung motionless in the sky. By the stars, Captain Reed's voice came through again, shaken. "We had no idea. We could have caused a catastrophe." "The Shadowhunters aren't your enemies," Tom replied, feeling Blue's grateful touch on his shoulder. "They've been protecting all of us by guarding these crystals. They're willing to share the energy safely, but the chambers must remain intact." One by one, the mining ships turned around. As they departed, the Shadowhunters' patterns shifted from defensive red to calming blue. They had faced their first crisis not with violence, but with understanding. Tom looked at Blue, whose patterns now showed pride mixed with relief. "We did it," he said. "We found a better way." The translator caught Blue's response. "Humans learn. Shadowhunters learn. Together, find new paths, better paths." 1 year after Tom first encountered Blue in that dark cave, the research station had grown into something extraordinary. A gleaming city of curved buildings stretched across the valley, designed to accommodate both humans and Shadowhunters. Crystal-powered lights pulsed in patterns that both species could understand, creating a constant dance of communication. Tom stood on the observation deck of the new Interspecies Council building, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each vessel carried representatives eager to learn from what many now called the Great Bridge, the first successful alliance between humans and a species they once feared. Blue approached, its pattern showing the calm confidence of a respected leader. Other Shadowhunters followed, their young ones scampering between their legs, practicing light patterns with human children who had come with their scientist parents. "Remember first meeting?" The translator picked up Blue's patterns. "You small, scared, but brave. Changed everything." Tom smiled, remembering his terror in that cave. "I was terrified, but you were patient even though you were injured. You gave me a chance to understand." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Ross, now the head of the new Galactic Cooperation Initiative. The Admiral looked different from the stern figure who had once ordered Tom's evacuation, more relaxed, more open to new possibilities. "The latest reports are in," Ross announced, holding up a datapad. "The Joint Crystal Energy Program is a complete success. Clean power for 1,000 worlds, all safely managed through Shadowhunter wisdom and human technology. The Council has officially declared this the most successful first contact in galactic history." Blue's patterns shifted to show pride, but also humility. The translator worked smoothly now, catching every nuance of the Shadowhunter language. "Success because both sides learn," it translated. "Humans learn patience, respect. Shadowhunters learn trust, sharing. Both become better." Through the window, they could see the first graduating class of the Joint Space Academy, young humans and Shadowhunters who had trained together to explore the stars. The human ships had been modified with crystal technology, while the Shadowhunters had adapted their natural space navigation abilities to work with human systems. A small commotion drew their attention to the garden below. A group of human scientists was presenting their Shadowhunter colleagues with a new invention, a device that could translate their light patterns into holographic art. The Shadowhunters responded by teaching the humans their ancient songs, the deep rumbling tones that could now be felt throughout the city. They said we were monsters. Blue's patterns showed thoughtful sequences. You showed them different. Now they see truth, not what looks scary on outside, but what lives in heart. Tom noticed something remarkable happening in the garden. The young Shadowhunters were teaching human children their light patterns, while human children showed Shadowhunter youngsters how to draw with holographic crayons. Neither group saw anything strange about their differences. To them, it was natural to be friends. "That's the real change," Tom said, pointing to the children. The next generation won't know fear. They'll only know cooperation. Admiral Ross nodded. Other species are taking notice. We've received requests from 12 different civilizations wanting to establish similar programs. They're starting to understand. Sometimes what we fear most just needs to be understood. Blue's patterns shifted to show the sequence for future combined with hope. Around them, the city pulsed with life as humans and shadow hunters worked together, learned together, and built a shared future. What next? The translator caught Blue's question. Tom looked at his friend, remembering that crucial moment when he'd chosen to help instead of run. One small decision that had changed the galaxy. We keep building bridges, he replied. We keep showing the galaxy that understanding beats fear, and maybe one day there won't be any monsters left, just friends we haven't met yet. Blue's patterns glowed with approval, matched by similar displays from shadow hunters across the city. The light show reflected off the crystal buildings, creating a spectacular display that symbolized their unified future. As the twin suns set on the horizon, casting purple and gold light across the landscape, Tom realized they had created something unprecedented, a place where the galaxy's most feared predator and humanity's greatest strength had combined to create something beautiful. They had created hope.